I've created 6 categories to find the best plays for Week 11 fantasy football. They're boom bust, best matchup, must sit, sleeper, the top rookie of the week, and the Hail Mary play of the week. We'll identify a player from each category to help us make those critical lineup decisions. Let's kick things off with the boom bust play for Week 11. This is a player with huge upside but a low floor. Think high risk, high reward, but I'm willing to roll the dice with the hope that he explodes. And for Week 11, I'm looking at Jaylen Waddle as the boom bust play of the week. It took a Tyreek Hill injury, but we got our answer. Jaylen Waddle, still good at football. Since Tyreek Hill went out, Jaylen Waddle has 43 targets, 29 receptions. He's gone over 80 yards in 5 of 6 games, and he's scored in 3 of those 6 games. He's back. Even Tua has looked better in recent weeks. Kind of. And in fantasy, Jaylen Waddle, he's been top 25 or better in 5 of 6 games, including finishes of wide receiver 8 versus the Panthers in Week 5 and wide receiver 5 against the Falcons in Week 8. He's top 10 in the NFL in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns among wide receivers. He's 6th in yards per route, 8th in first downs per route, with a 32% first read target share. And now he gets a matchup with the Commanders, who allow the most receiving yards, the second most receiving touchdowns, and the second most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position this season. So fire up Jaylen Waddle this week. I think he'll continue to dominate. I also like DK Metcalf against the Bengals and Ashton Jeanty against the Cowboys as good boom bust plays for Week 11. Moving on to the best matchup, plain and simple. This guy has the nuts matchup for Week 11. Start him if you got him. I'm looking at my guy, Woody Marks, against the Titans. If you follow me at all, you know I've been a big Woody Marks fan this season. And his time has officially arrived. He played 80% of the snaps in Week 10. He was the first running back on the field on 9 of the Texans' 10 possessions, according to a tweet by Josh Norris. He handled 74% of the running back rush attempts. It was targeted 3 times to Nick Chubb's 1. He averaged 4.5 yards per carry, 9 yards per reception. The backfield takeover is complete for Woody Marks. And now he gets a matchup with the Titans in Week 11. The Titans allow the 5th most rush yards per game, the most rushing touchdowns per game by running backs, and the 2nd most fantasy points per game to the running back position. If Woody Marks continues his usage from Week 10, he will dominate this game and be an RB1 in fantasy football. I also like Javonte Williams' matchup this week against the Raiders, Rashad White against the Bills, Joe Flacco against the Steelers, Jaylen Waddle against the Bengals, DK Metcalf against the Bengals as well. Josh Jacobs should beat up on the Giants defense, Aaron Rodgers against the Bengals, JJ McCarthy against the Bears. He's interesting. Justin Herbert against the Jaguars. Ashton Jeanty has a really ripe matchup against the Cowboys. Rico Dowdle against the Falcons. Aaron Jones against the Bears. Jaylen Waddle, who we already talked about. Aronde Gadsden against the Jaguars. And Zach Ertz in Spain against the Dolphins. Great matchup there. Moving on to the must-sit player for Week 11. This is a player with a terrible matchup. Needs to be on your bench if you have other options. I'm looking at the Seahawks running backs, both Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet this week against the Rams. Man, this Seahawks backfield has been so frustrating this season. Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet are just completely cannibalizing each other. And the second you think maybe you have a read on which running back is getting favored, it flips back the other way. Walker's had some good weeks. He's been RB9 and RB10 in back-to-back weeks early in the season. But only one other double-digit performance, and that was all the way back in Week 4. And Charbonnet, he's been better, but he's completely touchdown dependent. And then in Week 10, the Seahawks added a 3rd running back to the mix. No, seriously. Freaking George Holani got in the game for 7 carries, including 3 in the red zone, and he scored a touchdown. Unbelievable. And now they get a Rams defense that has allowed the 4th fewest rushing yards, just 1 rushing touchdown by a running back, and the fewest fantasy points per game to the running back position this season. I hate this backfield, which sucks because normally we'd want a running back in a good offense like the Seahawks. But I just can't do it. At least not in this matchup. Sit him if you can. I'm also sitting Tony Pollard against the Texans, Tyrone Tracy against the Packers, Marquise Brown against the Broncos, Xavier Worthy against the Broncos. He also popped up with an injury during practice this week. And then Evan Ingram against the Chiefs. Moving on to the sleeper for week 11. This is a player flying under the radar. Not many people are starting him, but the stars are aligned for him to be a good play this week. I'm looking at Tampa Bay running back Sean Tucker against the Bills. Now, Bucky Irving returned to practice this week, but it sounds like he's more likely to play in week 12 than in week 11. So assuming he's still out, I like Sean Tucker as a deep sleeper this week against the Bills. Tucker's role has been increasing over the last couple of weeks, eating more and more into Rachaad White's touches. In week 10, Tucker actually led the Bucs in rushing yards with 9 carries to Rachaad White's 10. We saw something similar in week 8 as well before the bye, when Sean Tucker carried 12 times for 42 yards and a touchdown, outproducing Rachaad White on 1 fewer carry. Now, White is still getting most of the passing downs work, but this is now back-to-back games where Sean Tucker has taken on about half of the rush attempts of the running backs in that backfield. And in both instances, he's been far more efficient than Rachaad White. The Bucs could continue to increase that role moving forward, which could mean big things for Sean Tucker in a game against the Bills, who allowed the 3rd most rushing yards per game and the 6th most fantasy points per game to the running back position. And no team has allowed more rushing touchdowns by running backs this season than the Bills. This game could easily turn into a shootout, create a bunch of scoring opportunities for a guy like Sean Tucker, who has more red zone carries than Rachaad White over the last 2 games. I'm not saying Sean Tucker is a smash start this week. He's absolutely in the sleeper conversation as a top 36 running back. Other sleepers I'm looking at, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez against the Dolphins. Pick your flavor. One of these guys is going to have a good game against that awful Dolphins defense. Probably Bill, but Chris Rodriguez, his role has been increasing. See if that continues. Khalil Shakir against the Bucs could be a shootout, like I mentioned. Khalil Shakir is the wide receiver that we want in that Bills offense. Trey Tucker against the Cowboys. Cooper Kupp returns to LA to play the Rams. Maybe he gets a big revenge game. We'll see. Cooper Kupp, I like him this week. Andre Yoshafat is very interesting against the Steelers. Isaiah Likely. If Rashad Bateman's out this week, I know it's a tough matchup against the Browns defense. They do have a good defense. Isaiah Likely, he's had a 17% target share, I believe, over the last 2 weeks. If Rashad Bateman ends up being out this week, Isaiah Likely, very interesting as a sleeper. Joe Flacco, gotta like him against the Steelers this week. Marcus Mariota against the Dolphins. Kenneth Gainwell against the Bengals. And Calvin Austin in that same matchup. And actually, let's just start all the Steelers tight ends as well. I think they're all sleeper worthy. Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington. Remember when the Steelers played the Bengals a few weeks back? All 3 of their tight ends scored touchdowns in that game. Fire them up. See if it happens again. I don't know. AJ Barner as well against the Rams. And if you want more sleepers, I do a sleeper show live right here on the Yards Per Fantasy YouTube channel every Saturday night with my co-host Sam. We give you 6 sleepers who you can start, plus a bold prediction to cap off the show. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. Let's continue on with the Rookie of the Week. This is a rookie I expect to outperform expectations in Week 11. I'm looking at your guy, Ashton Jeanty, against the Cowboys. It's been a weird rookie season for Ashton Jeanty. He's showed a lot of promise, and he has had a few plays that have reminded us exactly why he was such a great prospect coming out of Boise State. But that Raiders O-line, man, just brutal. But he's the guy. He's the guy in that backfield And he'll get a Cowboys defense this week that has allowed the 6th most rushing yards per game and the 5th most fantasy points per game to their running back position this season. And despite the struggles, Ashton Jeanty has already had an RB1 finish this season as well as an RB5 week, plus 3 other weeks inside the top 15. The Raiders are going to want to show off their first-round rookie on Monday Night Football, and a game against the Cowboys is the perfect opportunity to do it. I bet Ashton Jeanty finishes as a top 10 running back on the week, at least. I also like Woody Marks, who we already talked about, and Aronde Gadsden dodged a big bullet last week with his injury. Sounds like he's going to be fine. I like his matchup against the Jaguars. Fire him back up. He's a must-play tight end every week as long as he's healthy. Let's cap things off with the Hail Mary play of the week. This is a player who is rostered in less than 5% of Yahoo leagues, but can be started if you need a desperation play. I'm looking at Tyler Lockett, another Raider against the Cowboys. Tyler Lockett, he's only been with the Raiders for a few weeks, but he was already running 79% of the routes in week 10 with a 24% target share. But the Jacoby Myers no longer on the team, and the rookies Jack Batch and Dante Thornton not ready for NFL football. Not sure they ever will be. It looks like Tyler Lockett is going to be playing a fairly significant role in this offense. He's already got a history with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, so it's not all that surprising that he's gotten up to speed pretty quickly. Not only was he on the field a bunch in week 10, but he also led the team in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. And now he gets a matchup with the Cowboys in week 11. We already know how horrible that defense is. They rank 3rd in most yards allowed to wide receivers, 1st in most touchdowns allowed to wide receivers, and 1st in most fantasy points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. Tyler Lockett is rostered in just 3% of Yahoo leagues right now. So if you need a Hail Mary play in a deep league, pick him up, lock it in. I also like Tyler Higbee as a Hail Mary play this week against the Seahawks, Trey Harris against the Jaguars, Noah Fant in that tight end bowl against the Steelers, Jeremy McNichols against the Dolphins. One of these Commanders running backs is going to have a good game against that Dolphins defense. Ty Johnson in a shootout against the Bucs. Michael Wilson is interesting. Jacoby Brissett has kind of unlocked that offense. No Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. Maybe we look at Michael Wilson against the 49ers, Dontavian Wicks against the Giants, Jaylen Wright against the Commanders. He has been getting an increased role over the last week or so. He's interesting. Jalen Lane against the Dolphins, Roman Wilson against the Bengals, and Jalen Naylor against the Bears. That's it. Those are our 6 categories. We talked about probably about 30 players in this video. I hope something from this video will help you get that W in week 11. But make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video. I'll be putting out content like this all season long. And if you want more from me, you can find my rankings, articles, resources, and tools at yardsperfantasy.com. Don't forget to check back here on Saturday night for that sleeper show.